Okay, welcome to Learning Design and Design Masterminds podcast that bridges the worlds of instructional design. And today we're going to talk about the return on investment. I'm Sherry Conklin, your host, and with me we have Daisy Anna Barreto, our co-host, and I am thrilled to be your guide as we explore these exciting topics. Today we have with us Erika Robertson, and could you go ahead and start off by telling us about your experience in instructional design and anything to do with return on investment?
Sure. So when I left the program, I graduated in 2005, and it was always with the intent of moving to the corporate space. So I did start as an instructional designer for 5 years with Cisco at the time, because two other MIT grads, Eddie Thomas and Nicole Johnson, aka Nicole Rodman, were there as well already. And the important thing to think about is when I was in the program, it's not like I launched into all of a sudden I can measure and conduct ROI studies. That didn't happen overnight. And thinking about it was, a little nerve-wracking. So I think the program has evolved because it was tough to go into the corporate sector. The program is very focused on preparing students that were staying within education. So moving to New Hanover County schools or in higher ed, not necessarily the corporate sector. So I didn't walk in prepared. However, the MIT program gave me the foundation, the fundamentals on which I built my entire career. So you have to, when you're moving into the corporate sector, if that's your intention, ideally you have the internship first. So as you both know, that's the linchpin. And so having that exposure to some degree, if you're going to move into corporate, you're not going to get it with an internship at UNCW. Use the network of alumni that you can reach out to. And even if it's unpaid, which is horrible, I hate that word. When it comes to internships, you need the exposure first. So you either need to shadow someone, you need to know what you're getting into. I had the luck of two MIT alums that were friends that were already in Cisco as ID, so I could pick their brain a lot and establish my comfort level. But be comfortable that you have such a strong foundation and the theoretical principles, solid instructional design that is agnostic to whatever industry you're moving into. This stuff works. So rely on that. That should give you confidence. Be also, as you're moving into it, be prepared as an ID in corporate to be confident with your own voice. Don't be an order taker. You're not there just to be an order taker. Ask why, make suggestions, be confident in what you've learned to contribute to the team, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for that collaboration, and you contribute to it. So starting out as an instructional designer was foundational. And there, it wasn't just about knowing a certain tool. Just be very familiar with the variety that's out there, because you never know. You could work at 3 different companies and they use 3 different sets of tools. So as an ID, be familiar with the overall functionality that's needed, and you can always teach yourself a new tool. So please don't be married to one. Learning a new tool is easy. So in the corporate world, an instructional designer can mean many things. So at Cisco for 5 years, it was actually we were setting up competency frameworks. So it wasn't going in and I had to create e-learnings. That was one aspect, but a huge part was setting up competency networks for account executives and leaders, and mapping, here's the content we have, here are the competencies that they need to have. I mapped a lot of content to expose the gaps. Where do we need to focus and build more content? So those behavioral objectives that we all know and love and write constantly. So it's, does this match? Does this support it? So that was significant. I was the administrator for our content management system, which ended up, we won a Brandon Hall and Excellence Award while I was there. So internally, the content management system, being comfortable with the best practices when your target audience, in my case, I've supported sellers and customer facing roles my entire career. What is going to take remove the obstacles and make it easier for them to find what they need, learn what they need just in time they're walking into a meeting or they're preparing for a certification. There are so many best practices that we learn in the program, and it's putting those into place. Here's a content management system that was pretty much homegrown at Cisco, and how can we build it? How can we design it? And then I track the metrics every quarter. So be very comfortable with numbers when you leave the program, because that's been a huge differentiator for me in my career trajectory, is be comfortable looking at data, making sense of it. And even as I report it to leadership, this is who's looking at what, then what are they doing? What feedback are they giving? And if they're not giving enough, how can I get more feedback? So be comfortable with the quantitative side and how to expand the qualitative feedback you're getting, because that is absolutely just as important. And we also used Second Life, which I know you did at UNCW back in the day. So it's funny when people talking about VR, I'm like, yeah, that's nothing new. So it's Second Life. And so my team, we actually were charged with creating pilots using Second Life to find out, is this worth the investment for Cisco? So we created these built-in Second Life, for example, learning products and learning how to negotiate. We were, how do you learn how to do something, but in a virtual world? And at that point, they were more concerned about dressing their avatar than getting to the actual content. So it's, how do you test a new tool, the functionality, and again, go back to your instructional design principles. There's so many, oh, isn't this cool? Wouldn't this be fun? And my team and I were actually just reminiscing, my Cisco team, a couple of weeks ago, about, we were in World and someone created a paint gun. So we had virtual paint guns, because that's how we blew off steam. So there's so much fun. There's so much fun to be had. But where do the sound instructional design principles come into play? And that's what's important. You have to be the spokesperson for those to remind everybody, don't get caught up in all this other stuff. So there's some great opportunities. The instructional design for me led in creating and designing that experience in Second Life. So whether it's Second Life or it's another tool, it's a simulation that I later did in another role. It's relying on those, and it's leveraging the kind of tools that we've used to step back, look at that analysis. What do we want them to do? What are those behaviors? Begin with the end in mind. So, ROI is out there, but only 7% of projects actually get measured to the ROI level. So there's so much beneath it that I'll talk about real quick. But then I moved to SAP from Cisco and became a performance consultant. So essentially that moved me to be supporting a segment of the business with what do they want to do, and what are the recommendations strategically and tactically that I can help put into place to make that happen. So it's building on instructional design, but then I built on top of that from a performance consultant standpoint. How can I, and through those recommendations, I changed and moved into that trusted advisor role, which is really, really, really key. Is here's what works. Here, that's not a good plan. Or you look at, doing the analysis and realizing, oh, well, you thought they needed product knowledge, but really they are not comfortable in negotiation skills. It's not product at all. It's more of those business skills, which they call soft skills, but it's really not, because they're so important.
So, Erica, did you ever have difficulty talking your client or where you were working into actually doing the analysis to gather data? Or was it usually something like, it's a product issue, they need training on that, and that's what I need you or your team to do?
That is such a great question, because I think in one of the biggest misconceptions moving from the program into the corporate sector is, oh, we're going to have so much time for these wonderful formal needs analysis. No, you have 5 minutes and $0 in your budget. So that's such a great question. The important phrase to work in is perceived need, because that's what you encounter in the corporate world. Is anecdotally, this leader, they've been told, so they're telling you, oh, what they already know what the problem is. So listen, you take it all in. But especially now, it's really, I think within the last, I would say, become more elevated and prominent in the last 5 years, is data-driven decisions. So you can validate or invalidate that perceived need with the right data. And nowadays, I can't think of any company that wouldn't support that and say, let's, before we make an investment, before we spend budget dollars on this solution, let me take a look, let me slow down, and it might be a week. All you have is a week. That's going to be it. You might have a day. So be ready for some rapid analysis. And it's looking at data in the CRM like Salesforce. It's looking at dashboards in Tableau. It could be talk to those in role, not just their leaders who are going to morph whatever they think their team needs. Talk to the people that are in your target audience. Have a quick focus group, ask questions, because you're absolutely right. But you can present it in, I don't want to use this budget dollars without making sure this is what we need. And then you can look at the data and think, what I'm seeing, it might actually be this. And it's actually more fundamental than the product knowledge. So, using those kinds of approaches, you want to make sure and validate it through data-driven, make a data-driven decision. You want to spend budget money wisely, which they always want. So you might have some more time, but that's more strategic, like implementing a voice of the field survey internally. And you want to marry that. That's something that I put into place at VMware. So as I moved to VMware, and I did much of the same thing as a performance consultant, but then I was lucky enough to be asked to build and lead the learning measurement analytics team. So it's all around the measurement of learning. And that has been a game changer from a career standpoint, because again, it's the comfort, talking about the metrics, the data, using the data-driven, building and adopting, pushing the adoption in VMware to leverage. And I did not leverage Kirkpatrick. We talk about that in grad school. Instead, it's Phillips. So I did go to the ROI Institute. So through that, I was able to, because VMware had sponsored that for us, it allowed me to go deeper than we were able to go in MIT, and becoming a certified ROI professional taught by Jack and Patty Phillips, who are icons in our area. That, I put that to work building that team. So strategically, when you're looking at measurement, putting in things like the voice of the field, I did twice a year to make sure I'm getting that feedback directly from our target audience. I'm looking at results from voice of the customer surveys, and together I have a 360-degree view. This is what we think internally. This is what our customers think. And there I found some inconsistencies, for example. So, measurement and evaluation, we use the word evaluation most often in the MIT program, but it's really, I look at it as broader the overall measurement framework. And evaluation is more than just looking at how a course did. It's, looking at that entire framework. And the reason I look at Phillips is because another thing to be aware of in the corporate world is your leaders will say ROI, but they really mean business impact. They don't mean ROI. And it's important that as the learning expert, you kind of ask more questions, because really, like I mentioned, ROI is not commonly done. But the difference in Phillips breaks apart business impact and ROI. So moving into the corporate sector, you need to be very aware of that framework. Start out with Kirkpatrick, which is still wonderful. So you still have to be aware, your level 1 is your reaction, the smiley sheets. And frankly, I don't care if you thought the room was too cold and you want better food. I don't care. So, the smile sheets are level 1, but I put in a level 0, and that's completion. Did you take it? Did you show up? That's important. The level 0, level 1, how do they feel about it? You have to create a very effective evaluation sheet, because you can put questions in there that indicate future adoption, relevance. That's going to give you guides to how successful you'll be in that behavior change.
Is this a survey that you're doing for the
survey for level 1? Level 2 is, did they learn it? Level 3 is application or adoption. 4, business impact. And Phillips separates ROI, because you want to be able to talk to it, and that's the holy grail of measurement. But really, most business leaders are talking about business impact. So it's definitely very important to keep them separated. So you can look at, more and more companies are going to take the time to make sure they partner with you to set up a clean, clear measurement program, because you, as an ID, as a performance consultant, or if you're leading the team for learning, you need to be able to connect all the good you've done, and is it making a difference? And it's not like you can tell them tomorrow, but month over month, quarter over quarter, you can show that you're learning, which will never be a direct correlation, but it will absolutely be, causation. But you can look at the correlation. Here's where we're contributing. And Sherry, you mentioned something earlier with, we can see it's okay, we've had these programs, but there's something else going on that's preventing this behavior adoption or this overall business impact. It's not all about the learning, but it's such an important part that at least if you can talk to your part, the bonus structure, there have been recent layoffs in the company, there's a reorganization. So there's so many other factors. They've changed their product set and they're coming out with too many releases too quickly. The team isn't aligned. So there's so many other factors going on, but you can stand by what you've done in the learning world to show this is making a change. This is helping us reach those ultimate KPIs that the business has set.
Are you putting this Phillips ROI, and I just looked it up, methodology in place before you actually put the training together? So like all at the beginning. So you've done the analysis, you've determined the problem, and
yes, another good question, because the business leaders you're partnered with, they want to hear you say, I'm going to start with the end in mind. Okay, so let's talk about the objectives, and looking at those objectives. What do we expect? What's the outcome you are looking for? And ask your business leaders that. What do you want to see? What do you want to change? What behavior are you looking for? What impact to the business? They might want the deal sizes to increase. They want the sellers to be able to go through the sales cycle in half the time. They want better qualified opportunities because there's too much time wasting. So you have to understand the business, and then you look at, okay, how can we get there? Okay, let's look at this. Is it an e-learning? There's some coaching. There's, okay, the certification could cover the product, but what are the other factors? So then you have to look at those objectives and then look at how are you going to measure this before you get into articulate and create anything. You have to have a measurement plan. So absolutely. So, okay, what do we know? What does success look like? Success looks like this many people, say 100% of the sales team completes it, 100% are certified. We expect after a quarter that, how are we going to measure the adoption? Because you can't talk ROI unless you do all the other lower levels first. You can't stand by that. So learning, reaction, okay, we can measure that. Did they complete it? They gained a certification. How do we know if the behavior is changing? So that's often a very tricky one. And most of your programs, they're going to be into that level. Many won't get beyond adoption at first, but you cannot possibly say this impacted the business unless you can show the behavior changed first. So for example, at VMware, we rolled out value selling as a methodology to one of the sectors, the commercial sector. And the way I measured adoption was because in the CRM, in Salesforce, we added an e-value prompter. So they had to go in and answer these questions for their opportunity, which they learned about doing in value selling. So we could clearly see, I could measure on the dashboard who is using these e-value prompters, that they're filling this out, they're using this in the opportunity. So the use of those value prompters over month, I could say we have adoption. We have 100% adoption because everyone in the commercial sector has been using it. I can see the change, the percentage of opportunities, which salespeople are using it. There was none that were, no one was not using it because the leader was in support of that. So it's not just me saying it, it's their sales leader saying, we're doing this. So you have to have that, whatever that measurement trigger is to measure adoption. So once I could be secure in saying this has been adopted quarter over quarter, then I could look at, in a control group analysis, I could look at the commercial team versus the other teams that were not using value selling. I could see that this team, their deal size was 2 times larger. So there's business impact right there. And I could justify and I could correlate that back to value selling because I had 100% adoption. So in every QBR, every quarterly business review, I would give an update to those metrics, those dashboards that we built in Salesforce. So that's the kind of plan you set up ahead of time so that the leaders knew that every month I'm going to look at this dashboard. Every quarter, we're going to look at this. I'm measuring the e-value prompters. I'm going to do a control group analysis. So you're absolutely putting that plan in place and looking at all of those levels. ROI was not a discussion. Again, that's the holy grail, but I could get them to the adoption, the business impact, and separate that for them. So I knew that plan before we started any kind of value selling because absolutely the wrong thing to do is, okay, we launched this 6 months ago. Now let's see if it worked. So then you're trying to go backwards. You need a time capsule. It doesn't work that way.
This is such wonderful information, and I know we're about out of time. We could go on and on with examples. I was messaging back with Daisy and just said, I didn't know about the Phillips ROI model. We have got to integrate this because, we really want to prepare our students to make sure that they do have some baseline skills, even though you never know what you're going to get into. I cannot thank you enough for sharing this information.
Oh, you are very welcome. You're very welcome. There's been lots of lessons learned. And when you go into the corporate world, probably the biggest lesson that I mentioned earlier is to prepare for sales kickoff and to drink as much caffeine as fits in a mug that's bigger than your head. That will help you survive life in the corporate world.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
You are very welcome.